So I want to read Ecclesiastes 11, 1 through 6 again. Because context of what we're going to say tonight from verses 7 through 10 is very important. So let's read 11, 1 through 6 again. Send your grain overseas, for after many days you will get a return. Divide your merchandise among 7 or even 8 investments, for you do not know what calamity may happen on earth. If the clouds are full of rain, they will empty themselves on the earth. And whether a tree falls to the south or to the north, the tree will lie wherever it falls. He who watches the wind will not sow, and he who observes the clouds will not reap. Just as you do not know the path of the wind, or how the bones form in the womb of a pregnant woman, so you do not know the work of God who makes everything. Sow your seed in the morning, and do not stop working until the evening, for you do not know which activity will succeed, whether this one or that one, or whether both will prosper equally. So last week we talked a little bit about limitations. What kind of limitations do I have? Limitations regarding knowledge. Increasing limitations regarding physical ability as time goes by. But there are certain things that we're not limited. We have God who's given us revelation so that we don't have to be ignorant about the big questions in life. And yet we still don't always know exactly how he orchestrates things. Do you know his character? Do you know his will and ways in general? Yes, but not necessarily every last little detail about orchestrating things. Last week we also talked about the difference between something that's right or wrong morally and things that are right or left. Making decision to buy this car or that car, making the decision to go to this school or that school, making a decision to marry this person or that person. There's parameters for all those things, right? Don't let money be an idol. Don't be unequally yoked to an unbeliever. Those are clear things, but does that mean I've got 3 people in front of me that are great believers, great, wonderful women of God? Okay, well, there's other things that can go and make it to be a wise choice, but are you going to turn over to the end of the Bible and say, oh, it has to be Rachel, not Stephanie, in Revelation 23? You're not going to find that, but you are going to find parameters for a good wife and so on and so forth. We also talked about a little bit regarding the unknown. Usually, there's fear of the unknown or anxiety about the unknown. And what could you do about the unknown or the annoyance about the hand that you've been dealt? We talked about different ways you could respond to that. You could clam up. You could live wild and crazy. You could try and dictate the terms that you go throughout life, but life doesn't always come on your own terms. So how can you live in freedom? How can you be bold? The rest of chapter 11 is quite similar. It's going to continue to talk about the fact that it's good for you to be alive. It's good to be alive even amongst the unknown, even amongst the anxiety that might reside in, oh, I don't know what comes tomorrow. I mean, I could have a horrible car crash, so I can't go outside. Or you might unexpectedly be let go from work. Okay, that happened to my wife. All of a sudden, we're gonna let you go. If this might happen, maybe that might happen. All the ifs and maybes, right? Living your life as if you're afraid to go outside. Well, that's kind of problematic. You can't live like that. But you also can't fall into ditches where I'll just live with no fear whatsoever and I'll go, hell for leather. Okay? Or being ruled by fear. Both of those are ditches to fall into because I show no restraint, I show no consideration of my actions, or the unknown dictates my life. Guiding a path in between them in freedom, understanding God's wisdom, understanding his morality, understanding his character. So let's continue on, verses 7 and 8. Light is sweet, and it is pleasant for a person to see the sun. So if a man lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But let him remember that the days of darkness will be many, and all that is about to come is obscure. Let's read verse 8 again. So if a man lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. But What does that sound like? If a man should live many years, let him rejoice in them all. That word, let him rejoice in them all. Is that an absolute, you must do this? Not exactly, right? It's more of a wish. It's more of a, may it be the case that if you have lots of years, you enjoy them. You learn to enjoy them. It kind of sounds like, well, this is something that should be done, even though it's not phrased like a black and white commandment. Do this, don't do that. This is still something that we need to consider. Because what is the question we usually ask? We're usually asking the question, how can I stop myself from sinning? Totally legit question. It is absolutely necessary to ask this question because sin is so easily entangling us, right? I mean, you can count the ways that it's already happened and it's only Tuesday. Does sin entangle you? Yes. Is the evil of our actions, our attitudes, our words, is that what puts Christ on the cross? Yes. Thanks be to God that he has provided an answer. He's provided a solution to the sin that separates us from him so that it shows the legitimacy and the need for justice to be done and for sin to be atoned for. We totally need to give thanks to God for that indescribable gift, that he has offered salvation to pay for the penalty of our sins. Also, we should be thankful to God that he's not just left us to our own devices after having received that gift. If you've never received that gift, if you've never considered what does it mean to put my faith and trust in Christ for salvation, answer that. You need to answer that first, because what I'm about to say is not going to make any sense without that starting point. That has to be the starting point. Otherwise, what I'm about to say might sound like behavior modification, just like many other behavior modification programs that are out there. No, this is the basis here, your trust, because your trust in him means you are now rightly related to God, you're a child of God, all of your identity pieces are locked up there. Now, if that is your identity, now let's move forward in considering what is this question here. Back in verse 8, if a man lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. He has given us his Spirit to be able to do something like this. That is also another gift to be incredibly thankful for. Because what does our heart need? Well, our heart needs more than just tell it to not do things. If you only told your heart, no, don't do that, stop that, stop that, stop that. If that's all you told your soul, your heart, you'd be missing it, right? Because is that going to keep working? If you tell a child that, does that keep working? You need to redirect. God needs to work through his Spirit to redirect our hearts towards what alone is going to fill it. So, how is this different than self-help or self-fulfillment books that you could grab book after book after book, at the local bookstore? Because a lot of those self-help books will say, yeah, go out there, be brave, be bold, do this thing, try that thing, don't let anybody hinder you, blah, blah, blah. What's the difference between this counsel to enjoy and delight in the years that God has given and that self-help? Its object and its substance is God himself. That's the relationship. That's the sustainer. He is the one who sustains such a life. He's the one who gives the ability to rejoice in the years that we have. He is the one who gives good gifts. He's the one who gives so many good gifts that puts those gifts in perspective, because we can kind of become obsessed about the gifts themselves and forget the giver. But if we look at the giver, the other gifts come into their right proportion, their right understanding. He's the one who can put all these things into perspective. So, question that goes kind of along with this. If a man lives many years, let him rejoice in them all. What has Pastor West been talking about the last few Sundays? How we speak, right? Are you going to be held accountable for your words? Yes. Let's flip this here. will you be accountable to what you did enjoy and what you did not enjoy? Yes. What do you truly delight in? Because your words are an overflow of your heart, right? Jesus will say that. And your actions, your things you take delight in, are the overflow of what's in your heart. Right? You could read the list of, here's the list of the things according to the flesh, and then a few sentences later, according to the Spirit, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those show forth the work of the Spirit in your life. So this is going to be a question for you guys to discuss. What do you delight in? What do you genuinely delight in? So you're in Ecclesiastes, turn back a little bit over to Psalm 1. The very beginning of the Psalter. It's not an incidental placement for the first psalm. This first psalm is intentionally at the beginning. Even though each psalm pretty much is independent, this is a great start to the book of Psalms. Psalm 1 through 3. How blessed is the one who does not follow the advice of the wicked, or stand in the pathway with sinners, or sit in the assembly of scoffers. Instead, he finds pleasure in obeying the Lord's commands. He meditates on his commands day and night. He is like a tree planted by flowing streams. It yields its fruit at the proper time, and its leaves never fall off. He succeeds in everything he attempts. Wow. Does that sound quite similar to the man who is able to, has learned how to delight himself in the years that God has given him? I mean, his leaves don't fall off. He succeeds. He's firmly planted because of where he finds his delight. He delights himself in the Lord's commands and he meditates on them day and night. So you're in Psalms. Turn to the right a little bit, over to Proverbs 4:23, which is probably going to be a familiar proverb to a lot of you. Proverbs 4:23. Proverbs 4:23 says, "Guard your heart with all vigilance, for from it are the sources of life." Or some of you might have memorized this verse as, "Above all else, guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life." Okay? Which is something to learn and to be wise about over time, which will then eventually have the wellspring won't get clogged up, right? If you're bogged down by other things, if you're not thinking about delighting yourself in the Lord and his will and ways and so on and so forth, that wellspring is going to get bogged up, or it's going to get fouled up. It's going to get stopped up. It's not going to be the life-giving thing that this proverb is talking about. Okay? One other psalm, you don't have to turn back over here. This one is probably quite familiar too. If not, I would encourage you to memorize it as well. Psalm 37:4. "Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart." Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Well, okay, if you're delighting in the Lord and he gives you the desire of your heart, those are kind of synonymous words, aren't they? If your delight is him, well, he's going to give you more of him, and his Spirit will be implanting his desires in your heart. Some people will read this verse and be like, cool, so if I go to God like a genie and say a bunch of stuff to him, he'll give me everything I want. That's not how it works. That's not what the verse is saying. Delighting in him first and foremost as my God and my Savior, who is the source and sustainer of my life. I need you to form my desires. I need you to give and implant your desires. Because again, just telling your heart no is not enough. Okay? So, turn over all the way to the New Testament. 2 Timothy 2:22. 2 Timothy 2:22. Lots of twos going around here. This might be a verse that is a little less familiar, but I think it touches on exactly what we're going at right here. 2 Timothy 2:22. You have one thing you're supposed to avoid and one thing you're supposed to embrace. But keep away or flee youthful passions. Okay? If you stopped there, that would say, well, empty your heart, stop feeling about things. No. It says to embrace something else. Pursue righteousness, faithfulness, love, and peace in company with others who call on the Lord from a pure heart. You notice he doesn't stop his sentence. He also does not say desires are bad. Your desires could be good. Your desires, when brought into conformity with who God is, righteousness, peace, love, faithfulness. Wow, could you imagine a man who looks like that, who has that deeply embedded by the power of the Spirit? That is going to be the man who has learned to delight in the many years that God has given him. So, back in this verse here, verse 8, is this a command we can keep? To a certain degree, yes. And it will be for his glory, because who is the one who's able to help us keep it? Who's the one who is able to do it? He is. He's going to get the glory. He's going to provide the things. He's going to be the one who gives enablement. Do you need to be definitely present to look out for the sin that easily entangles? Oh, absolutely. We're not negating that. We're just saying the other side of the coin. What is your delight in, and how can it be redirected? Are our desires out of whack? Yes. But God has not left us there. He has done something about it, and he's slowly but surely working on you to transform you to that. So, a couple of things that, again, something I wanted you guys to discuss in a few minutes here. What are some things that can get in the way of this fruit coming out, of this delight in the Lord coming out? I'll just toss out a few. Maybe you guys can think of more in your discussion time. Fear. Okay? Fear is one. Grief, or maybe unprocessed grief. Is grief appropriate? Yes. If it's not dealt with and understood and brought to the Lord, it can be building things in your heart that can stay there and come out at who knows. And same thing with anger or bitterness. Okay? I haven't done a funeral, but I have not been to a funeral where the guy just sits up and says, this guy, he's just a bitter old man. Now, that's usually not something you want to be saying at the funeral. But what happens? Bitterness is a root that grows. You get this imagery in the New Testament of don't let a bitter root show itself. But as soon as it shows itself, well, you got a lot of work to rip that root out versus heading it off at the beginning. So let's finish up Ecclesiastes 11 here, verses 9 and 10. Rejoice, young man, while you are young, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Did the Bible just tell you to do that? Oh, yeah, it did. But know that God will judge your motives and your actions. Banish emotional stress from your mind and put away pain from your body. For youth and the prime of life are fleeting. How could verse 9 be dangerous? Pursue your desires and the impulses of your heart and go after them. Yeah. If you just stop in the middle of the sentence, right? Can this be dangerous to tell a young man? If you told a foolish young man, because what do fools do with wisdom that's given to them? They twist it, they throw it away, they disregard it, they leverage it for their foolish ends. So this can be destructive to a fool, because they're just going to keep going off in their foolishness to pursue their foolish desires of their hearts. But that's the fool. We here are striving after being wise. Another problem that could come here is delaying the thought of judgment. oh, judgment, that's like 30 or 40 years down the road when I die sometime. You don't got that. You don't have that guarantee. And it's not only judgment at the end. God can bring various means to bring judgment, right? We've been talking about this, God pressing it, or various stories we keep hearing. You can kick against the goads, and God will just be like, hey, I'll just keep prodding you. I'll keep prodding you. It's hard for you to kick against the goads and kick against what God is doing in your life. You will continue to run down that trail and find that it doesn't get you where you want it to go. So you have to live, but you also have to live wisely. And it's better to start that off early. Okay? I know we were talking about young men, but if you started that off early, then the many years that verse 8 talks about can be something you rejoice in. How many of you wish you would have listened to mom or dad maybe a couple of decades ago? Several. Okay. The many hands that went up are evidence of it. To start early on and continue on it. And you notice this statement here kind of sounds like other things he's been saying. He's been commending several things throughout the book. He says, eat, drink, find enjoyment in the wife of your youth, and find enjoyment in one's work, and find enjoyment wearing clean clothes and wearing some, well, I would call it cologne, lotion, okay? But these other things to enjoy in life. This sounds like that same commendation to follow the impulses of your heart, but don't forget the other part. And how come this here, but know that God will judge your motives and actions? Sometimes, I've had conversations with this verse several times with men over the years. It sounds like a killjoy, doesn't it? Go off, go off, go off, go off. But don't forget, God's waiting to smite you with a lightning bolt for every last little good thing you enjoy. That doesn't sound like a right view of who God is. But is he still holy? Is he still righteous and just? Absolutely. Does he know how to give good gifts to his children? Yes. And if you're going to discard the gift, what does that say to God? You gave me a good gift and no, that's not for me. I'm not allowed to enjoy those good things. That doesn't sound like a cheerful and thankful heart who receives things well from the hand of God. Now, is it worth sifting through to say, is this actually from the hand of God, or is this me taking things into my own hands? That's definitely a question worth asking and considering as well. Let's look at verse 10 and we'll wrap up here. Banish emotional stress from your mind and put away pain from your body, for youth and the prime of life are fleeting. This word fleeting, we've seen it many, many times. It's the Hebrew word hevel. Vanity, fleeting, or ephemeral. I would, if I was doing my own little translation, I would say, don't be stupid when you're young. That's the quick and dirty version for me. Don't be stupid when you're young. Enjoy the fact that you've got energy, you've got ambition, and you've got things you want to accomplish. But set out to use it for God's glory. Don't forget, he is there all the way through life and the judge at the end as well.